as I mentioned in the book, there was also DNA from Burke as well as Patsy on the pink nightgown that had been discovered in the wine cellar near JonBenet's body.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. DNA could solve the JonBenet Ramsey case. Really? Do you really think so? Do you really believe that? The Ramseys want you to think that the key to the Ramsey case is in DNA testing. Find a match and abracadabra, the case is solved. As early as February 17th this year, JonBenet's stepbrother, John Andrew, went on to Dr. Oz to plead the case for DNA testing.
We can use technology. This case can be solved, and it should be solved.
When John Andrew says technology, he means DNA technology. The Ramseys' lawyer, Al Lynn Wood, when confronted with the grand jury indictments in 2013 that had been hidden from the public and the media for about 16 years, reacted by citing Boulder District Attorney Mary Lacey's quote-unquote exoneration of the Ramseys based on a 2008 DNA report, and that came from Bode Labs. According to the Denver Post, the Ramsey lawyer Lynn Wood said at the time, quote, "The DNA was not available to the grand jury in 1999. What we have here is a release of a sliver of the evidence that the grand jury looked at and reviewed. It's just based on incomplete evidence." End quote. I'm not sure what Wood means when he says the DNA was not available to the grand jury in 1999. It sounds like he's saying DNA tests weren't conducted prior to 1999 and that the grand jury simply didn't hear any evidence related to DNA. In fact, as early as December 30th, 1996, DNA samples from the crime scene were sent for testing. They returned about a week later on January 9th, 1997. There was also a second series of tests submitted a week later, and then another series of DNA tests sent to Cellmark Labs in May 1997. It's not really necessary to read any of the DNA reports. There's no smoking gun there. There's nothing that really stands out. But if you did read the DNA reports, what do you think happens if DNA tests are done and they point to a member of the Ramsey family? As a matter of fact, tests were done on bloodstains found on the pink Barbie nightgown found bald beside JonBenet in the wine cellar. Here it is circled in this crime scene video screen grab from the wine cellar. Can't quite make it out? How about this Boulder PD crime scene photo? And here it is from another angle. That pink Barbie nightgown had bloodstains on it, and the pink nightgown is referred to numerous times as item number 17 in the 2008 DNA documents, as well as photographed with several portions of the material sliced out for testing. When the results came back from the DNA test conducted on that pink Barbie nightgown, item 17 from Bode Labs, DNA processing concluded that the individuals associated with Burke Ramsey and Patricia Ramsey could not be excluded as possible contributors to the mixture DNA profile from the test sample. So I think what's really being suggested here now, today, is that DNA testing is fine so long as it excludes any and all of the Ramsey family, even if, such as in the above case, they aren't and cannot be excluded. You may well argue that since Mary Lacey, a former Boulder District Attorney, read the DNA reports and since she concluded that the Ramseys were innocent and exonerated them and thus they are irrevocably no longer suspects, that means all DNA testing must necessarily be directed at someone else, someone unknown or someone besides a family member of JonBenet's, right? And look at these headlines from the New York Times. New DNA technology clears the family of JonBenet Ramsey, dated July 2008. from CBS, JonBenet, DNA rules out parents. And I believe that was from November 2004. Then from the Boulder Daily Camera, DNA in doubt, new analysis challenges DA's exoneration of Ramsey's, and that DA is Mary Lacey. Then going to the current news from 2 days ago, from 9 News, development in the JonBenet Ramsey investigation on 25th anniversary of death. US police hope advances in DNA technology could help solve the mystery surrounding JonBenet Ramsey's death. Now, although this is evident from multiple sources, including the New York Times, the Boulder Daily Camera, and CNN, I'm just going to use the New York Post as an example of DNA or amnesia. What are we actually talking about here? Is DNA going to break the case, or is the media, are we suffering from amnesia? A few days ago, the New York Post trumpeted the same headline as everyone else, giving it the same sort of timbre, the same theme. DNA enhancements may solve JonBenet Ramsey killing 25 years later, and that was dated December 22nd, 2021. The article was written by Joshua Rhett Miller, and yet 5 years earlier, the very same reporter, writing for the very same newspaper, wrote something completely contradictory. Shocking DNA twist in JonBenet Ramsey murder, October 28, 2016, by Joshua Rhett Miller. And if you go to the pertinent part, DNA evidence in the killing of JonBenet Ramsey does not support a former prosecutor's decision to clear the girl's relatives in her death, according to an explosive new report revealing new information to the public for the first time in the 1996 killing. And that report was a DNA report, and the prosecutor referred to there was actually District Attorney Mary Lacey. Ramsey apologists confidently claim that a tiny DNA profile collected from JonBenet's underwear belongs to a single unidentified male, and that this profile, this singular profile, matches the same profile for the same unidentified male from a sample found under JonBenet's fingernails. If we quote from that Boulder Daily Camera article, DNA in Doubt, from 2016, quote, forensic experts examined the results of DNA tests obtained exclusively by the two news organizations disputed former District Attorney Mary Lacey's conclusion that a DNA profile found in one place on JonBenet's underpants and two locations on her long johns was necessarily the killer's, which Lacey had asserted in clearing JonBenet's family of suspicion. In fact, those experts said the evidence showed that the DNA samples recovered from the long johns came from at least two people in addition to JonBenet, something Lacey's office was told, according to documents obtained by the Camera and 9 News, but that she made no mention of in clearing the Ramseys. But the crucial part to read between the lines is that this vaunted unknown male DNA profile is actually a partial profile and possibly a mixed profile as well. Quoting from the article, additionally, the independent experts raised the possibility that the original DNA sample recovered from JonBenet's underwear, long used to identify or exclude potential suspects, could be a composite and not that of a single individual. And that's the end of the quoted section. Now let me ask you again, do you think DNA is the key to solving this case? Although this mixed profile was fed into the CODIS database almost 2 decades ago, in December 2003, it's never had a single bingo, not a single match. This so-called profile had the minimum of just 10 genetic markers, and if it is a mixed profile, then you can search until the end of time, until the end of the world, and you'll never ever find anyone. It's like using a partial fingerprint from 2 people and hoping to match it to an individual. It's not going to happen. But pushing the narrative that the killer is out there, which is something that Patsy said on CNN, and all we have to do is wait for DNA technology to magically conjure to provide an answer on a platter, well, that's perfect for the Ramseys. It's perfect because it means no one is looking at them, and it's perfect because it means you don't really have to do any investigating anymore. You can just wait and see. Wait for technology to catch up. Wait for these technological tests to give you the answer. Or complain that the Boulder PD are inept, corrupt, or incompetent because they won't do the tests. Interestingly, as early as February 2nd, 1997, the Rocky Mountain News was reporting about legal limitations to DNA testing. Quote, "But PRC testing will destroy the small amount of DNA that investigators have. The law requires that a defendant's lawyer also be able to test some of it or monitor the state's tests. And although there is not yet a defendant in the case to notify, tests on the fluid have been delayed due to police concerns over this issue." End quote. Interestingly, in May 1997, Jamison went onto the Geraldo Rivera show to say, quote, "Boulder DA Alex Hunter said the DNA will not be the silver bullet. If it were an outsider and they had a match, it would be, but not necessarily if it is the father's DNA." Quite interesting. So the DNA is not the silver bullet if it's going to point to a member of the family, kind of thing. When Detective Steve Thomas was asked on May 11th, 2000 about DNA, he responded as follows, quote, "You are oversimplifying the DNA. Neither you nor I are DNA experts. Thus, I relied on those who are experts and who were part of the investigation. This is not a DNA case. It goes far beyond the depth and breadth of what we can discuss here online." On the 19th of May 2004, John Ramsey was campaigning. He was trying to win a political office when the Rocky Mountain News provided the following article. "Experts dispute Ramsey claims about DNA evidence." This was way back in 2004. Quote, "Ramsey's campaign website has a section called Family Tragedy/Update, which makes the assertion that forensics experts have successfully identified the final DNA marker from a sample found in JonBenet's underwear, and that the family has been advised the sample came from her murderer. That claim is disputed by the forensic scientist who developed the genetic profile from that sample. The scientist who talked to the Rocky Mountain News told them it is possible the sample came from the killer, but that there are other possibilities that explain how the sample got in the underwear. You have DNA that's male, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's the killer," the scientist told the News. "It could be innocent. It could be from the undergarments manufacturer. It could be a lot of things. Of course it's important, but it's not more important than the rest of the investigation." And so here you have the forensic scientist who developed the genetic profile saying that the DNA profile is not more important than the rest of the investigation. This particular scientist asked that his name not be published in the newspaper, and so they spoke to a second forensic expert who is also close to the case. This expert also agreed that the significance of the DNA sample is open to interpretation. And then this was the response to this from the Atlanta attorney Lynn Wood, representing the Ramsey family since the murder and certainly at that time. And he told them that he disagreed with this. He said, quote, "Anyone in a law enforcement investigation who's searching for an innocent explanation for foreign male DNA found mixed in the victim's blood on her underwear is either incompetent or prejudiced to the point of being unqualified to participate in a fair and objective investigation." End quote. Incompetent or prejudiced, right? Now let's go to an article in the Daily Mail, and this article isn't too long ago. It's from 29 October 2016. It's headlined, "New analysis of JonBenet evidence suggests Ramsey family should not have been cleared based on DNA results, and that there are traces of multiple people on victims' clothes." Quoting from the article, "An examination into the DNA evidence in the JonBenet Ramsey murder case by the Daily Camera and 9 News has found that samples taken from the child beauty queen's underwear and long johns did not come from one unknown male, but rather multiple people. Forensic experts took a look at the lab results and reports in the case and came to the conclusion that the DNA samples taken from the long johns and came from at least 2 people in addition to the victim, while the sample taken from her underwear could be a composite and not a single individual. These findings were based on the experts looking at the same reports that former Boulder District Attorney Mary Lacey cited back in July 2008 when she made the decision to officially exonerate the child beauty queen's parents, John and Patsy, and her brother Burke in her murder. Based on their findings, these results would not be enough to clear the Ramseys of suspicion in the case. It would also not be enough to implicate any member of the family. Let me read that again. Based on their findings, these results would not be enough to clear the Ramseys of suspicion in the case. It would also not be enough to implicate any member of the family. And that brings us back to those DNA samples that could not be excluded of Patsy and Burke on this nightgown found in the crime scene. At the ground zero of the crime scene, you found touch DNA samples of Patsy and Burke on this nightgown. In a poll that I did on YouTube, around about 80% of you said that DNA is the key to breaking this case. On the 19th of November 2002, another investigator with expertise on forensic issues who spoke only on condition of anonymity when referring to this minute sample of DNA in JonBenet's underwear said, quote, "We certainly don't think it is attributable to an assailant. That's our belief. When you take everything else in total, it doesn't make sense. I've always said this is not a DNA case. It's not hinging on DNA evidence." End quote. And that is from a news article dated 19 November 2002 from the Rocky Mountain News. You can imagine that if this is a composite profile, as I've said before, then you're going to be looking for a profile for the next 10 years, 20 years, 25 years, probably the next 100 years, perhaps even the next 1,000 years. You're going to be looking for till the end of time, perhaps for a profile that doesn't exist. You saw a similar scenario from the defense team in the Amanda Knox case that reduced the entirety of evidence, and there was a lot in the Amanda Knox case, to DNA testing. And in the end, what they decided was, because the DNA samples were contaminated and because they were degraded to such a degree that there couldn't be certainty, and so as a result of that, Amanda Knox is found innocent. In other words, they found what they thought could have been a profile of Amanda Knox's boyfriend's DNA on the bra clasp of Meredith Kircher, and other DNA profiles as well on a knife, right? But because they weren't 100% sure of this, they decided, well, because we're not guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And that is where you take the entire case and you hold it over this whole anvil of DNA. It's DNA. DNA is everything. It's DNA or nothing, right? And some cases just are not DNA cases. Cases where there is contamination, wiping down, covering up, staging, and all the rest. Can you imagine if Chris Watts went to court today and said, my case is a DNA case, prove that I killed Shanann, Bella, and Cece, where is my DNA? Well, is the Chris Watts a DNA case? Can you imagine if everyone agreed that it was and you couldn't find any DNA that proved Chris Watts did what he did? Would that mean he was innocent? Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.